Excuse me.
Do you want to hang out after the weekend?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just get through their visit. So we've got,
Yeah.
today I was getting the little house ready, pulled out the couch and put the little squishy egg things on, got all the blankets and everything ready to wash and freshened up for everybody.
All right. And we're live. Oh. What do you guys? Let's just start about the opinions for the low self chapter. Lower self.
I know this.
Oh, I don't know where your book is.
I enjoyed it. I've been enjoying this book. It's definitely one you gotta like reread a few times too,
Yeah, I'm
though, to
gonna
get
have to
certain
get through this.
concepts.
I'm gonna have to get rid of probably give it a second read through.
I just keep marking pages that I want to go back and things that I want to try.
Highlighting philosophy.
He is around 7.
We read through 7, yeah.
No, he has a new book out, don't you?
What's that, Shannon?
This author has a new book out.
Oh, does he?
Just came out about 2 weeks ago.
What's called?
Self-possession. I don't have to read that. I already do that.
There's so much in this chapter.
Yeah, it's interesting, and there was a few words I'd never encountered before that I had to stop and look up. What was that?
Me too.
There was one recent, it was right towards the end, I remember what is that? It's about trying to do something in a way. It started with a T, and I had to look it up. Oh, there it is.
Huh.
Titteration, is that what it is? It said, I suggest titteration when undergoing this exercise. I was like, what is titteration?
I highlighted it. Shannon, what was the name of the second book?
I'm getting it. I thought I had it right here with me, but I
Oh.
couldn't the other.
All right, just chime in.
I'm looking it up.
What?
The inner child.
She's looking it up.
Yeah, she's
Oh,
looking
okay.
it up.
Hi, can you turn it down a little? Hiya.
I'm sending you a link.
She's sending me a link, my dear.
Awesome sauce. Thank you, Shannon. I'm like addicted to this dip. It's totally what I'm like doing right now. Anyway.
This is the first thing I did one day.
Oh, it's not
You know.
I'm in that same. Yeah. I don't eat till like 12, 1 o'clock, and then I have a shake, and then I
It's
don't
called
know.
Mastering Magic.
Master and magic.
Mastering Magic.
That sounds good.
Maybe we should add that to the book club list. He's a pretty damn good writer. So chapter 7, the lower self in the shadow. This was a big. It was a very intense chapter, I think. A couple of the exercises I think he has. He doesn't have very many exercises. 52, 53, and let me know if you guys can hear me.
I can hear you.
And 54, which is the glamour spell. Okay. So I know I think there's more, but so I highlighted quite a bit. Well, I'm just getting back to the beginning of the chapter. The first thing I highlighted in this chapter was on page, sorry. For me, it's 101.
That's the first page of the.
That's it, 101.
Yeah, it says the lower self assesses its environment and relays that information to the middle self, which interprets the bodily sensations, emotional feelings, instincts, gut feelings, and hunches into thoughts and words. When the lower self and the middle self are in alignment, they have a conversation, which we call intuition. I was reading this part of the chapter, and that kind of stuck out to me because as I'm learning my gifts and learning how to identify them, sometimes it's a little hard to interpret whether or not you're getting a message from something versus a thought you're just having. And they kind of like mesh really closely together. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to define what is and what isn't. So the way that he describes this is the lower self assesses its environment and relays information to create words and feelings and thought. But the lower self and the middle self being in alignment and that conversation you have, does that, if they're not aligned, does that mean that you're not able to connect well? Or does that mean that later on after he talks about, sorry, I totally jumped into this, like, does that mean like later in the chapter he talks about how hold on, let me fix my brain here. There's conflict. He talks about how there's conflict with things that manifest in our reality. Do you guys remember what I'm talking about in the
I'm
chapter?
trying to find.
In chapter 7.
Yeah, it's in chapter 7. Sorry. It was the part where he was talking about how he was describing the lower self. The lower self being described as animalistic, primal, childlike,
Inner
sexual,
child.
and sexual.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Being primarily composed of blood and flesh. The lower self comes from the ancestors, and the ancestors lived through us in what witches, such as Raven Gramasi, refer to as. I still have to research some of those people that
Heather,
are in here because those are
Heather,
new names. So I'm really interested person that's just so like shortly down after that. I don't know if this is the first page for you guys, then it would be beginning a new paragraph. The lower self assesses the environment and relays information to the middle self. So I'm trying to interpret how I think the biggest thing here is how do you interpret that first?
So the lower self is described as animalistic, being
Mhm.
primary composed. So your lower self is from your ancestors.
So how do you interpret bodily sensations? So it's right here. Lower self,
Assesses its environment and relays that information to the middle self.
which interprets the body sensations, emotional feelings, and instincts, gut feelings, hunches, all that shit. Okay. It says when the lower self and the middle self are in a line, they have a conversation, which we call intuition.
Right. So when they're in line, that's when you're leaning into your intuition.
Okay, but so when they're out of line, he talks about them later in the chapter that they create manifestations, like outward manifestations, kind of like when the chakras aren't in line, and you end up like maybe wearing your heart on your sleeve, or people pleasing, or doing something,
We're talking, doing this.
Right.
The other
So,
thing
like,
that manifest.
is that similar to what he's talking about here?
Lower self is ancestors, middle self is our earthly self, and then the higher is So when they're not in alignment, I would imagine that's when your discernment would be off. That's what I would imagine. But I don't remember exactly reading it.
Well, he talks about it a lot with describing how our lower self works.
Mhm.
Okay, so
This is the closest is the ID.
right, the ID. Then he moves on into the ID. It says the ID seeks pleasure and induces anxiety to avoid unpleasant feelings and pain. So he's psychologically breaking down of the different parts of our whole.
Yeah, so it makes it like or is it line our middle section is doing things like smoking too much for those that's when you get those balances.
I feel it's another way to like look at the chakras.
Well, the lower self would be your root
Right.
and your sacral. The middle self would be your solar plexus and your heart, and your higher self would be your
Intuition.
third eye and your crown. Is how I kind of visualize
where's the
it.
throat?
Oh, that would be in the higher self too.
Yeah.
Sorry, higher self. Well, it's kind of the heart is supposed to be the bridge between the two. So I guess the throat, how we speak,
Or maybe
how we
the
see, and how we connect.
right, how we see ourselves is how we feel about ourselves and how we speak about ourselves. I think maybe it's the middle self. And the divine is the intuitive and the oh, I don't know. It's so
Yeah, I mean that's
it's just so weird to hear it from different. I'm trying to make a connection that's linked to everything, I guess.
right. To try to make you understand that.
And then he moves in past. So let's get into this ID. He says the closest psychological. Oh, I'm breaking up. You can't hear me.
Off and on.
Okay, Kaya, turn that down.
Way down.
Yeah, the closest psychological parallel to the lower self is the ID.
Mm-hmm.
While the lower self isn't the ID itself, the ID is part of the lower self
Right.
and helps us to understand the lower self. The ID is impulsive, primitive, aggressive, sexual part of ourselves that consists of all the things we've inherited biologically from our parents. So would that
So,
kind of feel like the ego?
Yeah.
Oh, still can't hear?
no, it's not the ID, it's the id.
The id.
Sorry,
Can we move that a little closer or no?
Oh, we can. Is it better? Would
I
that
just feel
work
like-
better?
Look at me, my blind ass can't see. I don't want to mess up here. I didn't know if we could put it here.
It's better. I can hear better.
I can hear you better
There
now
we
too.
go. Is that better?
There's a lot of background noise.
Yeah,
I
I thought it
was
was
trying
too
to-
far away. I was having a hard time hearing.
I had to get my daughter to turn her thing off.
the id. Oh, there's Cassie. She jumped in.
Oh, hi, Kathy. Okay, so
I-
yeah, so you were reading that. Sorry, I had to turn her thing down.
Okay.
It says
So it's the id. The
Mhm.
id is what Sharon. So it's not the ID, the id.
This is a newborn child is all id and later develops ego and then super ego.
So yeah, it's the ego.
That's what I was thinking. The id was kind of like ego, but
Mhm.
that's it's a part of our lower self.
Interesting. The next part, or what he says here, is the inner child. Let me finish what I'm chewing. The lower self, about, I want to say like a quarter of the way down the.
Lower
Yeah,
self
okay.
can be understood as the inner child. That one.
The lower self is the part of us that dreams and imagines and is entirely non-logical and therefore not constrained by it. The lower self connects with the higher self the easiest in this manner. And the middle self weaves them together to make a sense of the information. This is why intuition, which is a lower self phenomenon, and psychic ability, which is a higher self phenomenon, tend to blur together and weave in and out of each other. Let's talk about that concept for a second. So intuition comes from our
lower
our lower self or our ancestral whatever's, right?
That's what they're saying, but that's not my understanding. But yeah.
What's your understanding?
Well, I always thought of it, our intuition coming more, I wouldn't say lower, I would say middle and high. But they're saying they're interwoven because your intuition is like from your gut, right?
Mhm.
But you get that intuition, I guess what they're saying and seeing it more complete now is that it's when your lower self and your higher self in alignment, your intuition is like spot on.
Mhm. And I wonder if the psychic ability isn't necessarily considered intuition. Psychic ability is maybe considered
Tapping
into divine or spirit or something outside of ourselves that we assume is intuitive. How interesting. Okay, so he continues to say when the lower self is out of balance on its own, we indulge ourselves too much. We lack restraint, become prone to addictions and bad habits. Or on the other hand, we deny ourselves pleasurable experiences, or denying our body.
My lower self must be so out of whack right now. What did I say? I can't. Today I couldn't eat. I just had nothing. And then I lived off of coffee and water and I was not feeling my best today. So need to tap in and get that lower self connected again.
Right. Then he goes, a little later down, he goes, discipline is the challenge of the lower self, and finding out what the appropriate level of control is to make us content while simultaneously not giving into our vices and ultimately destroy our lives. And then he quotes Freud. Freud compared the ID to a horse and the ego to the rider. So one way to look at the lower self's challenge is as training a wild horse without abusing it.
That's a good little analogy.
So that's hard because the body is amazing and it can do all kinds of cool shit. But it does break down.
The next sentence is pretty interesting. Creating shadow issues.
Which one?
When the lower self is out of balance with the middle self, we become unconscious of our feelings and our experiences and deny the wholeness of who we are, thus creating shadow issues.
So would that be like defining avoidism? I mean, think about it for a second.
Like
When something, especially with PTSD, because I've been dealing with it my whole life. When something triggers me, I automatically want to run away. I just want to run away.
Avoidance.
And not deal with it because that is just not in my thing to do, right? So would that explain that essentially? What you just said?
Because you are unconscious of our feelings and our experiences, so we deny the wholeness of who we are.
So is that like avoiding?
Like denying what's going on so that we're not looking at the wholeness.
Yeah, I would say so because it says that we don't want to own or acknowledge.
Then the lower self is where we shove all the things we don't like about ourselves, and as they creep up, we have to look at them and transition them. So
it's just like unlocking the chakra.
Yeah, conquering our fears.
Yeah. So there's quite a few chapters or part in this chapter that kind of helps us deal with the shadows as it comes along. I highlighted one more portion that says when the lower self is out of alignment with the higher self, we become monsters, being the worst examples of humanity. No, this might, I seem that this is a little bit of strong language, but I think I get his point. So the higher self has a spiritual moral compass of right and wrong. In a sense, when the lower self is out of alignment, the higher self, with the higher self, we become too feral, quicker to damage, and harm others in a fight or flight behavior. We may also have a hard time relating to and empathizing with others or caring about how we affect the environment and animals. To energetic and emotional or unconsciously defeat our energies.
From the energy sucker.
It's interesting. So anybody could be energetically vampiric.
So that basically is the definition of narcissism. Like, does that mean we all technically could have narcissistic?
Well, everybody has
Everybody has
narcissistic tendencies. Everybody has them. But it's more about. It seems like it's about like becoming aware of the fact that during certain points in our healing process in our lives, we have the ability to fuck some shit up and not do stuff without realizing, like becoming an energy vampire and sucking energy out of other people.
Yeah, those are fun people.
Right, but then there's people who consciously do it, and then there's people who unconsciously do it. That's the thing. So, like, if we're out of alignment, then we may not be consciously aware that we're doing these things, but we're doing them. You know what I mean?
Trying to fill ourselves up or find that alignment.
Right, like some sort of pleasure seeking something to kind of like soothe whatever it is we're dealing with. And he says a little bit further down, it's the energetic anchor point for the lower self is the belly area, or in witchcraft, the cauldron of warming. The lower self is the sticky one, accumulates life force energy from around us to fuel us, and the cauldron of Posey indicates that the cauldron of warming is right side up when you're born, sending the steam of its life force up to the cauldron of motion and warming it up, hence its name. Which is that the lower self is represented by the animal imaginary of the serpent rising in healing wisdom, an image that appears in many cultures from Kundalini to the staff of I don't know how to say that one. This can I don't know.
Caduceus of
Caduceus and Hermes and the staff of Moses. I love how he does this, the staff of Moses and the Euryales of the Egyptian pharaohs. So he took like all the different traditions you could think of, like right there, and like see how they're all like that. He said close to earth and always connected and part of the world and the body. And he describes that as the base or the lower part of the world tree, the roots.
That's the realm of the ancestors, initiation, healing, and wisdom.
Yeah. And then he moves on to talk about the shadow self, which is the part of ourself where we just don't want to look at it. Like those are where everything that happens in life, the damages, the traumas, the everything goes right to our shadows. And then it's our job to heal from them. And when he was talking about this, I kept going back to spirit hacking.
Yeah, the shaman, that's what I was.
Right. Which is really funny because I was like,
a lot of similar concepts.
There's quite a lot of similar concepts in the two books. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but there really is quite a lot of overlap here, which makes me go, well, maybe
having
there's
dialogue
something to
with
that.
your lower self and having. It's funny because I highlighted that in that book.
Right, and then you talked about he talked about how spirits come to us with a problem that vibrates with our damage or whatever.
Yeah. So they're
and they like aggravate it
to get you to look at it and to help heal it and help them heal it, so to change the dialogue and to ask them what their needs are and
then it comes up similarly right here in this chapter with the shadow self. He says, Carl, I don't know if it's exactly the right part. I just know this is the first part I highlighted. So Carl Jung's theory of the shadow self is that we carry all parts of ourselves within our psyche that we want to dissemble. If we think of our ego as being the light in which we see ourselves, the shadow self is everything that resides within the psyche that the ego rejects. That might be a little bit hard to wrap your head around.
Compromised of our shame and our self-perceived weaknesses. It's the parts we hide and don't want to look at.
Right. It isn't necessarily wholly negative either. It's also aspects we weren't owning or addressing. Low self-esteem, empowerment issues, personal traumas, PTSD, whatever comes along with it. Those are all things that end up in your shadows. And then he says to address the shadow self is to take an honest look at ourselves through introspection. Except that is probably one of the most difficult things to do ever.
But it can be done, and it can be done little bits and little bits at a time.
Right.
It needs to be done with care and opened up and then integrated and learned and then moving forward because
Isn't that part of the retrograde, right?
yeah, looking.
Yeah. Oh, FYI, y'all, we're in like Mercury retrograde for the next 3 months. In case you didn't know, sorry to bust your bubble. Started on the 30th and it will end sometime
The end of December.
the end of December. Okay.
It's time for reflection, ladies.
Right. And
Rest and recuperation.
and then he spends some time talking about the knowing yourself, like being aware of your ebbs and flows and to know yourself thoroughly. He says,
The dark and the light.
right, this is the most famous psychics and trance channelers of all the recorded history was revered for her accuracy in ancient times. In the inscription on the temple obviously held a high level of importance for the temple. These words give us a crucial insight to, oh, you know what, I need to go further down, sorry. To do so, we need to understand who we truly are and not just who we want to believe ourselves to be. Jung proposed that one becomes enlightened about one's nature by not only focusing on the positive aspects of ourselves and our spirituality, but also by confronting our own shadow self. And then he talks a little bit about how to do that. Says like a child who ignores, the more one refuses to comfort their own shadow self, the more it throws tantrum to get acknowledgement. And this is, I think, where that came up
With the shaman.
with the shaman for spirit hacking, because I was like, oh, I can totally see what he's talking about. I agree. Yeah. He says Devin Hunter also teaches that many less friendly spirits will often try to use our fears and vulnerabilities against us. And that was another one. I was like, oh, that sounds just like that. Let's see. I'm going through my highlighted notes. Okay. On page 106, I think it is, where he talks about the esoteric texts that discuss the principles of nature and reality. He said he points out two important things to keep in mind here. The first, which the Kabbalion refers to as the principle of polarity, is that everything has a polar opposite. There is light and darkness, male and female, hot and cold. But the idea of polarity can only fully be understood through the next principle, which is the principle of rhythm. The principle of rhythm states that everything is a spectrum between two poles that are constantly in flux. Gender is a spectrum as light and darkness and temperature. Both Jung and many occult traditions place an emphasis on combining opposites into wholeness. Doug refers to this idea as individuation. Did I say that
Yeah.
wrong? Which is acknowledging the aspect of ourselves that we are unconscious of and integrating them into our sense of self. And then he talks about alchemy. He goes, in alchemy, this is referred to as the great work. And in occult traditions, including many witchcraft traditions, Baphomet is the symbol of the great work. One of my teachers refers to Baphomet as the great initiator. Baphomet is a symbolic image created by occultist. I cannot say his name.
Alpheus Levi or something.
Alpheus Levi, which was based on the trials of the Knights Templar in the 14th century. So now we've gone into this idea of Baphomet. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He's on
I looked at the picture and looked him up when I was reading.
108, 109. Okay, so like I have been drawn to him for some time. And then reading this part of the chapter, I was like, oh, well, that makes complete freaking sense as to why I have him on my...
Male, female.
Right.
Everything.
It just says the image, contrary to popular belief, is not an image of the devil, but rather an image of the universe as a force and intelligence and a the Greek god Pan. So he has a couple of things on his arm. He has one on one arm and a tattoo on the other. They have different symbolism. But for me, from what I understand, he represents balance, wholeness, like the whole of everything. And he is neither male nor female. He's genderless, but with genders. I don't know if that makes any sense. He says here, it says, on Baphomet's upraised arm is the word solve. In alchemical terms for breaking down the elements. On his lower arm, the word, I can't say that, Kogula, which is an alchemical term for uniting elements together. It is the source from which all things come, to which all things return, just as the traditional prayer in the Pharaoh tradition that states Holy Mother, in you will live, move, and have our being. From you all things emerge, and unto all things return. The Wiccan Charge of the Goddess, written by Doreen Valentine, states, for I am the soul of nature who giveth life to the universe. From me all things proceed, unto me all things return. In the Golden Dawn, the phrase, O soul of nature, giving life and energy to the universe, from thee all things do proceed, unto thee all must return, is recited in ritual. Both General Gardner and Aleister Crowley state that Pan is the all-devourer and all-begetter. They are all reinforcing the same divine force that is the embodiment within the image of Baphomet. So when you look at his character, he represents the dark, the light, the
Animal, the human.
the in the out, and the whole. He's the whole of oneness. And you know, when you look at his statue, he's often portrayed, and in this picture, he's just sitting. But when you get a statue of him, he's often portrayed sitting on a globe, which epitomizes balance, as well. So everything here is symbolic. So like the snakes on his lap, those represent healing. And you can just the whole of his whole character is all about balance. Okay, he says Victor Anderson is quoted as saying, God is self and self is God, and God is a person like myself. Similarly, in Aleister Crowley's Big Noctis Mass, the line, there is no part of me that is not of the gods, is spoken. For me, this suggests the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without. So it's literally summing up the unity that is within everything cultured versus, well, or religious What is your guys' first thought of seeing Baphomet?
I remember you asking me that.
Initially, I thought it looked very spooky, but really, I'm coming to learn that I need to stop being afraid of my darkness and start integrating it. And so when I look at things like that, initially I would look at it and go, oh, it's kind of spooky. But that's because probably I'm working through fear of some of my shadows. But the more that I've started to read, and I looked him up a little bit, and I started reading, it's really to me more about oneness and balance and the alchemy of life, and that everything is interconnected, and that we are God and we are co-creators with that. We are a spark of that, So although initially I thought it looked kind of scary, and I can understand coming from being raised in a Catholic family or from societal things that it looks scary. But looking at it now, I don't think it looks quite as scary.
I agree. When you showed me the statue in your house, I thought it was the devil. Like,
But that's because we've been taught to
yeah.
fear that, but we can't fear our shadow. We have to look at that and integrate it and realize that everybody has.
But it actually looking at it doesn't look scary now. Like,
Right, but your first image, most people's first image is what they portray in the Christian church as the scary guy that has horns that looks like a goat. You know what I mean?
It's funny when I look at it now, I see there's this thing. It's very similar to something I do within my practice of training somebody and then back up. There's a lotion, and it's just
So the interesting thing is that last your history, we realized that the development of what we become afraid of was actually based off of what you see. So the Christian church made things like Baphomet scary, so that we would not learn about his culture.
duality and about
Exactly.
and just stay in fear
Mhm.
and easily manipulated.
It's crazy, huh? Let's talk about this thing called self-possession he's talking about on page, I don't know, 109, 110, or 109. He said, this is exactly what it sounds like, being fully embodied and in alignment with one or more of your souls. Let's stop here for a second. One or more of your souls. That throws me off a little bit.
Doesn't throw me off because I've always had a belief that we're coexisting in multiple places at once, different aspects of ourselves, because I don't see time linear that way. I think that the past, present, and future is kind of all coexisting at once.
Yeah.
And so there's different aspects of ourselves. Potentially, to me, it's a concept that makes sense, that we can be parts of ourselves, although we may not be aware of all of them, that they are all coexisting. And that goes back a belief I've held, which made me start kind of questioning my Catholic background, was when I would meditate, I would always see these circles within circles and ever expanding. And I think that it's just, it is ever expanding, but I think it's very easy. I think there might even be talk in the Bible. I'm not very versed on the Bible about God being in more, aspects of, but really, I think that we can dwell parts of our soul. So it's aspects of ourselves. And when we integrate all of those pieces, I think that's when you become godlike. When you've integrated all of your souls, that's when you have a greater understanding of oneness, a greater concept of, I don't know, that's just kind of.
Well, I mean, I'm still wrapping my head around it.
It's a big concept. Just more souls. What do you guys think about that? Do you think we could all be coexisting, like pieces of ourselves, in different times, in different places, in different,
like totally quantum physics?
Yeah, I don't think, this isn't the only planet. I feel like and this isn't the only dimension. I feel like there's aspects of ourselves.
Right.
And I feel like that there's aspects of ourselves that are at this exact moment having a different completely experience elsewhere, but we're not aware of it in our humanness. And it's when we start to open ourselves up and integrate all of those parts of us to become more whole.
What's that saying? Your future self would be proud of you. Like, yeah.
That's
I can
just,
see
I
that.
mean, I'm still, there's so many concepts in here. I'm like, wow, I hadn't really thought about that.
Mhm.
You know, I think it's great that I can link to other books that we've actually read. I'm like, oh shit, you know. Okay, so it says if we think of our body as a building, we can choose to treat it like a haunted house with unknown aspects of ourselves roaming around freely, creating chaos, or we can treat it as a divine temple, honoring and having a personal relationship with the aspects of ourselves that dwell here. That might be where the body as the temple came from. We gain this relationship through invoking or summoning that aspect of ourselves to know ourselves better. Align ourselves with this aspect and build a relationship through which we harness its energy. And then that brings us into invoking the lower self on exercise 52. And I think this is the one where he like
Was the one.
hugs himself. Is it this one? Or was this the one with the bones? Okay, so he says the lower self can be invoked for elastic rituals and practices, astral journeying, dream recall, and to tune into your intuitive selves when you need to access your environment or situation from a more fight or flight mentally. Okay, so as a person who deals with a PTSD level that I do, this is almost like exposure therapy. Right. So like, the way that he's explaining this to you is he wants you to access your environment or a situation by which you have some sort of experience that causes an emotional response because your lower self is emotional. So the only way to address your shadows is what he's saying here is that you have to emotionally experience your shadows and live kind of in what that experience is to be able to learn from it and heal from it. So I don't like this process at all. How I do this process
Wow. And that's about learning and shaping. If we keep, like, for instance, if we keep associating ourselves, like me, I have my certain things, you have your certain things. We all have ways that we describe ourselves. So if we say my PTSD or my depression or my anxiety, like I almost can become move through it because it's getting into the victim mentality of it.
We're giving it too much
Power. So instead of saying it's like, oh, that was ancestral, what has been passed out, I have the power to change that, even though this was thrown on my plate or this has come to me, that it's gaining the power and letting go so much of the victim mentality and moving through that. I think that's kind of what he's talking about. So you kind of sit with it and look at it, but also gaining perspective because we have a perception of who we want to be.
Yeah.
Right? But we don't always live up to that goal, right? There's things that we don't. And then sometimes when I sit with my shadow selves, I go, oh my God, I'm so not grateful about this, that, or that. This is why I'm being shown this. I was not being, and realizing that, oh my God, here I think I'm somebody who lives in gratitude, but so it kind of helps you look at yourself with eyes that maybe you don't want to see so that you can do better next time.
But the process of invoking this is literally creating a re-traumatization.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. In order to look at it. But I mean, the difference is not getting stuck in it.
Correct.
Okay, and that's hard. That's really hard to do, especially when you have a problem with that. But that's what invoking the lower self is to induce a a traumatic whatever that caused the shadow that you need to address. I recommend if you're doing this type of these shadow, do one thing at a time.
Exactly.
It's not easy to have to experience them repetitively. It's really disabling if you have to if you try to do it with more
Too
than
much.
one.
Like with anything, balance.
Moderation.
Moderation and balance with everything.
But I love the way he writes out his spell. He says, Primal Stealth, Sticky One, Made of Shadow and Dust. Shapeshifter, Fetchmaker, Cardinal One of Lust. The undefiled, Wild Child, Dancer on the Ledge. Baneful Hero, Fire Stealer, Rider of the Hedge. And Pleasure Seeker, Dream Speaker, and Open-Hearted Hands. Non-verbal internal ancestral link to the land. I call you forth to rise up now as a sacred part of me. I call you forth to rise up now and overshadow me. Essentially, you're giving yourself permission
To be taken over by your.
to go into it. Just be prepared. It's ugly sometimes.
All the time.
Right. And then he talks about Bowman and Jung in the dialogue with the Shadow Self. He said that these people introduced him to the concept of the Shadow Self, and she developed a ritual that she developed based on part of the Divine Feminine Meditations from Jemana Sophia from her mystery school, as well as pioneering work.
John New Glass.
Yeah. So in this ritual, she provides help to seekers to get in touch with their shadow self aspects by coming into alignment and establishing a dialogue, transmuting and integrating them. The goal of this ritual is to help individuals remove shame from their shadow aspects, identify them as allies, uncover the core needs within them, and figure out how to best integrate and balance the shadow self on their daily lives. Where's this woman? I need to go meet her. It's just like another person. Thus, this practice views the integration of the shadow self as an important way to promote psychological and spiritual well-being. I suggest performing the invocation of the lower self before beginning the ritual. Comfortable and just breaths and call your energy back to yourself and away from the distractions of the world. Rest it in your core. Then she says, on the out breath, soften back into your spine and allow it to support you without effort. When you feel like your energy is returned and your emotions, are you peaceful? Do you feel any disruptions, anxiety, emotions, and if you have a particular shadow aspect to work on, bring it to mind. You may find that the aspect residing in your emotional body already manifesting as anxiety, anger, or fear. You may feel an emotion arise as you contemplate a specific shadow aspect, such as greed, seduction, wrath, the 7 deadly sins, and so on. Notice at this stage what the feeling is when it's coming up. So she's walking. The reason she is a piece quoting the other lady is she's and imagine where the shame and fear or judgment is located in your body. focus on a particular energy center, focus your attention on that area in breath, and then on the out breath, imagine the shame, fear, judgment, or whatever else is going on in there, release, like a ribbon unraveling into the universe. And then she says to repeat until you feel like any kind of blockages is moved. You could totally use this in any kind of chakra stuff too, guys.
Yeah,
Totally.
well, I always ask people to scan their body, and feel like the whole stuff in their body, their energy body, and our physical body. We feel that. And breathing and asking what is the lesson is it that I need you and you it's amazing.
Right.
It's how we
And the next part she asks you to envision it, like figure out what it looks like, give it a texture, a color, does it have a certain, whatever it is, hold that in your mind. And she says, now you will give that shadow aspect a voice and a name. The name can be a word or a description. The shadow self tries to communicate with us in all sorts of ways that we may not recognize, mostly subtly or indirectly. The goal here is to come into direct dialogue with the shadow self and communicate, asking it what it wants and why. So this is essentially teaching you how to meet your own needs by taking inventory through direct questions. And we were just talking about this today, weren't we?
Yeah. And it's very much, it's sitting with
The universe is laughing right now.
Yeah, having a big
Like,
giant laugh.
bam.
How funny,
Uh,
right? So there was even a thing in here where we were talking about hugging himself, hugging your inner child, letting your inner child know, hey, look, I'm here. I kind of like resonated with that a little bit. It was like,
was it you that told me, or was it my therapist? Somebody told me to do that. The inner child, like to
hug
just
that
hold
child,
them
hug
and
them, tell them you're there for them. Yeah,
It
because
helps.
it is
really
because you are releasing that fear from when you didn't have that control and knowing and taking that you are an adult and that you are not that not that little child anymore. Saying it's safe because a lot of times we push that out, integrating it back into us. It's the same thing. They're all the same concepts, different verbiage,
what did you guys
different
think?
techniques.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
What did you guys think of the lower self glamour spell?
That was the last one. I think that was towards
It's
the
on
end.
page 113 or 14.
Oh yeah, by this glamour I perform.
Right,
The octopus, I remember. Oh yeah, that was a good visual with the octopus and the cloudy in it.
well, the idea of the spell is to kind of like temporarily give yourself a boost of confidence to get through with whatever you need to get
I
through.
think he said if you perform it well, it'll last about a day. So if you're doing this, he mentioned about speaking or doing something and you need more
Something where you're terrified, you need some you need other people to see you confident, even if you're like dying inside. I like that. That's a good one.
So I didn't read that, but like
That was
I'm
towards the
behind. But
It's a spell you do.
could it
on
be like
yourself.
self-talk? Would that be the
So-
same?
The spell is serious. By this glamour I perform, I shape and shift my own form. Like the octopus within the sea, creating illusions so all others agree that all of their senses do perceive myself as this image I now conceive. So you're basically creating an image of what you want everybody else to see, even if you're not feeling.
Yeah, I visualize it like a shapeshifter. You're putting on this costume, even though you're not really putting on the costume, but they're so that they see you in the light that you want to be seen in.
Right.
For that particular thing, a job interview, he said he's used it for, or
That's
for,
what.
you have to talk in front of people, but you're feeling nervous. You put that on you so that when you go out, you're, again, it's perception and intention. So you're like, everybody sees me this way, so I am this way, and then it helps you get through that.
Get you through your day.
So it could help with like self-talk, right? Positive self-talk. Yeah. That's what I did today. That's why.
So then he gets into telepathy with animals and small children.
Mhm. I thought it was interesting how he described his dad, and that his dad has really integrated everything and showed the kids and the animals. Which is
Mhm.
cool.
My dad's pretty similar too. You know, he's got a lot of his own things, but you know, he just gets it. There's some people that just get it, and you're like, I don't know why you get it, but you get it.
Mhm.
And it's kind of how I see that. Mm. He totally brings up the motorcycle too, so it reminded me of my own dad.
Oh, really?
So what did you guys think of the telepathy with animals and children? Why do you think kids are so open, kids and animals? Why do kids and animals get to be so open and then the older you get?
Because you come in as a blank slate and then you accumulate, and I think we're open and more connected, more open to magical, more open to different concepts, but then life beats you down, or you're told this, or you're constantly told, no, that's wrong. And so it starts to become your new belief system, or it starts to kind of take that away. That's why I say our whole adult life is undoing everything,
Right?
everything that was done in our childhood, what we learned. It's really just connecting with yourself and what resonates for you, you know, and relearning and redoing what makes sense to you. And that's why you gotta go back and hug that inner child, because
Right. I'm so sorry that your parents were dumb and having their own shit.
But the same thing, it's all the ancestors, it's cycles, it's all, everybody's learning different lessons in different places. So but that's stuff that's carried on, and it's why we choose the families that we are born into, to learn and integrate different aspects of ourselves. Pick up where they left off.
Like the whole, the wrapping my head around that concept is just fucking terrifying. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, it's fucking terrifying. You think about all of the stuff that we realize we signed up for, and you're like, why did we sign up for this? Well,
Because we were fucking badasses. We thought we could take a lot. I think because when you're in spirit, you don't see things, you don't remember the humanness of it. You want to take on a lot because in spirit you're like, that kid is like, yeah, I can do that, but you don't remember the heaviness and the denseness of this planet.
Terrible. I don't, it's so mind. Right? That's why mind blowing.
Look at that cute doggy.
It's just, there's so much and there's no way it can be one way or the other. It's just not possible. It's totally not possible. It's all connected, I'm sure. And you know, but what I've realized is that when you start telling people that everything's connected, that you kind of start offending people. Did you guys realize that? Like a little bit.
They get offended.
Mm-hmm. By the fact that like it's not just their way or that way. It's like you can pick up the different pantheons and cultures across the whole country and the whole world and be like, okay, well, there's this aspect. Well, this matches this aspect. Well, this matches this aspect. Well, this matches this aspect. Well, here's 7 cultures. Y'all doing the same thing with a different name.
I actually, I agree with that. That book that you let me read about a lot of the religions are similar.
They are all
They're just
similar.
different names.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah.
Different names, different practices. Oh no, you gotta do it this way. Okay, well that's how your culture does it. This is why I didn't want to stick in religion. You know what I mean? Like I believe in oneness, and we're all like pretty much doing our thing within the realm of everything universal. But this book is kind of making my brain go.
Open up more.
I'm like, well, holy shit. You know, and then reading Spirit Hacking, which was, by the way, Terry's pick.
That was a great one, Terry. I really enjoyed that book.
I mean, and then having the links between two totally different, I don't even know if they know each other.
Terry, don't you see so many of the same concepts between both the Shaman Derek book, The Spirit Hacking, and this one? A lot of similarities
Yeah, I do.
in the way they, have the conversations with the shadow self and
Yeah, the shadow self for sure. I mean, we all really need to be in touch with our shadow self.
Yeah, but I feel like you can get too ingrained. Like we all do need to be in touch with them. That's
But you need a break,
self-awareness, but I
too.
think it needs to be done in balance. Sometimes you can overdo that, and there needs to be the balance between looking at the shadow self, fixing that, and then enjoying. We're really here to enjoy life, and I feel like so much of us have lost that joy of life. It comes in spurts, but it's not the same as when you were a kid and wide-eyed and excited about everything. And as we need to find that balance again. And I think, there's a lot of things like, guilt and shame around doing things that bring you joy or that you want to do. And fuck that. We need to do the things that bring us joy. We need to reconnect with those things, and there needs to be a balance. It can't all be looking at the doom and gloom. It's moderation within both. Having fun, having work, looking at ourselves, getting rest, going, everything is balance and moderation. Damn, my stepmother, she always said everything in moderation. That was like her thing. She was right all along.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ma'am.
It's a little after 8. I'm curious, by a show of hands, have you guys, has everybody been feeling a little tired lately, like a little lethargy? Because I have just been like, I'm glad it's not.
Yeah.
I'm just like, dude, like you were having so many good weeks, and now I'm like going, oh no, not this place again. Like I am tired. I feel like I could sleep for a week.
So retrograde.
I just think it's the shifting.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I've been having trouble getting up on time.
I've been having some waking up. I'm usually waking up about between 12 and 2.
Clock goes back next Sunday, or this Sunday.
So that's
It's really gonna mess with us.
Yeah.
We gain an hour.
Really?
We fall back.
Oh, thank you, universe.
Yeah, I just wish
I
I
want to move to Arizona.
Yeah.
Don't forget to set your clocks back an hour on Sunday.
Come on.
Well, that's going to be fun. I'll be in
Probably
Louisiana
in-
for a dairy goat show.
Oh shit!
Cute little goat.
She's awesome.
Put wings on them. And put like a shirt that looks like a torso and call it, what is it? Baphomet? Is that how you say it?
Baphomet.
Baphomet. Dress up your little goat. Oh, fun. Goats are so darn cute.
And they're funny too.
Mhm.
And they fall over all weird. Stupid. It's funny.
All right, so if we read
Okay.
7, we're on 8 for next.
So now we're doing chapter 8 for next week. It's called The Higher Self and True Will. So Miss Shannon, if you don't mind, could you please post to the group what we will be doing next week? Hopefully everybody who is feeling sick is feeling better by the end of the week. I may not be so lucky with Kaya, but hopefully she'll be better by the end of the week.
I'll get it posted.
I should stop taping that shit. Oh, not you. Sorry.
Oh, I was like, what? Oh, that was good.
No, there's so much being taped on my DVR that I have to go and delete things I haven't watched.
Oh, I remember that. Now I'm a person who does not do TV. I'm starting to miss it every now and again when I do watch. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot. I enjoyed some TV.
I didn't really watch too much.
Yeah, we only have we went from like 5 TVs and now we have 1 TV in the office. And we usually watch movies and stuff on it, but occasionally I do like that. There's a show on PBS I like called Finding Your Roots.
Oh yeah, I like that too.
I love that show. It's
I
so
do
interesting.
too. I mean, and I like there's is that the same one where they're looking at stars and going back to see their ancestry's roots.
Yeah,
And-
it's really interesting. And then they find out sometimes that they're related to other people.
Yeah,
They-
I'm
I love
related
it.
to
It's just
Benjamin
really-
Franklin.
Hmm.
I'm related to Benjamin Franklin.
I love it.
Oh, that's
so cool when we all are oneness. But yeah, you can find a direct link. Yeah, so interesting. I've had so many questions lately. I've been asking my stepmom a lot. It's so funny, the things you never thought about when you were younger. And I have so many questions now and everybody's dead. I have nobody to, get the answers from. So I'll often ask my stepmom, did my dad ever mention? And, it would be neat to do one of those things. That show is just awesome. It's really cool to see how they go back and how life-changing it is to get that history,
Yeah.
It affects people.
Found
That's
out
cool.
my great grandma was a psychic.
Mm,
That would have been cool to talk to.
yeah, it's so neat to find out. I know everybody. Oh, I think I'm gonna sleep good tonight. I'm gonna sleep all night. That's what I'm putting out there. I'm so tired of waking up in the middle of the
I
night.
am pretty tired too.
Mm,
Okay.
all right.
Sorry, I gave you 100 things. I'm doing all the ones for me.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw it away.
Okay.
Alright, shoot.
All right, ladies. So we're gonna call it a night. We'll read chapter 8 and see what that's all about. Next week. Oh, look, I moved it. No, it's just pointing at you.
Oh my god! Hide underneath the table.
All right, guys. You guys have a great night. Okay.
Have a good week,
You too. Good night, everybody.
Bye.